Okay, I'm happy to have this opportunity this morning to bring this lesson to you. I want to thank the elders for giving me the opportunity to do that. And I hope that the things I have to say will be encouraging and uplifting to all of you. I'm going to repeat an old sermon today. Last time I preached it, as far as I can tell, was in August of 2015. If you've got that good a memory, you're free to get up and leave if you don't want to hear it again. But I ran across this. I was going through some old computer files and things, and ran across this, and it really struck a chord to me, and I hope it'll do the same to you. The main character in this lesson will be Simon Peter. The process of salvation is a matter of God taking over the souls of men and transforming them. This is why the lives of the apostles are so valuable to us. In them we can see the process more plainly than anywhere else. When we study the lives of the apostles, we can see Jesus take a very ordinary human life and transform it into something noble and fine. In the case of Matthew, we see Jesus taking a man considered actually less than desirable by most of his Jewish contemporaries. Most of them even despised him because he was a tax collector. And several of the other apostles, one of them was basically a terrorist, I guess. That's why I have to have notes, because names slip out of my memory. But I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. And I didn't have that in my notes, so I'll just do that in extra. Anyway, all 12 of them were ordinary men. They weren't scholars or anything fancy at all. They're people just like us, just like all of you. Sometimes we feel like we're not capable of doing a lot of things in church. But when they started, they were fishermen, just ordinary men. Look how they turned out. We'll talk more about that later. But it's the life of Simon Peter that is especially valuable to us, I think, largely because we can read more about him than the rest of the 12. If our interest in Peter is merely historical, however, it will have very little value, though perhaps differing in degree, unless we see that something of a similar nature in his life can happen to us. There's little point in such a study. If we recognize that the personal experience of this one man is a universal possibility, then the experience has a great deal to say to us. My inspiration for this lesson about the Apostle Peter came from a series of articles in the Gospel Tidings publication written by N.E. Rhodes, who was an evangelist back in, he was writing and going around the country preaching, holding meetings back in 1965 to 66. A lot of you weren't even born then. Maybe our elders were, but that's about it. He was a character. You should have known him. Loved to play 42. And anyway, at the time I was recording sermons on a cassette tape. And every time he came and preached, I used 45 minutes tapes. Every time he came and preached, I ran out of tape. Anyway, that's just an aside I'm throwing in. It's not even in my notes. But I love to hear him preach. He was a wonderful, wonderful preacher. He's been gone for quite a few years now. My inspiration, skip it. Most modern books written about Peter spend more time guessing at his early years as a sinner than describing his later years as a saint. It seems that such an approach is more apt to be appreciated by the modern reader. We are evidently either more interested in or more at home with the sinner. The saint disturbs us. I might like to ignore the early years of his discipleship and begin with Peter at Pentecost. But to do so would lose much of the power of Peter's example unless we first study how he came to be the great apostle he was. For us to benefit the most, it is necessary to begin our study of the Galilean fisherman as he was when Christ began to work on him. Peter seems to have been a born leader. When he said, "I go a fishing," others were apt to say, "I'll go with you." I think one reason for this was his wholeheartedness. He was right sometimes and wrong sometimes, but he never tried to straddle the fence. If he denies of the Lord, it will be with oaths. If he repents, it will be with bitter tears. It was not in him to be lukewarm or half-hearted. He was not an educated man, and he didn't pretend an education that he didn't possess. When he went to Jerusalem, he still talked with the accent of a Galilean. But Peter was a sinner when he met the Lord. Why? What was wrong with him? Very much the same things that were wrong with you and me before we became Christians. He was of the earth, earthy. He was impulsive and unstable. He had the will to start what he sometimes lacked the courage to finish. That's one of my greatest problems. Every year I go and buy $50 to $100 worth of plants, and I'm doing good if I get half of them in the ground. And sometimes it's the same way with our Christian activities. But his chief sin was pride, something that we all have a problem with at times. When it was suggested that he might prove unfaithful, his reaction was, "Impossible. Maybe others, but not me, Lord." So his greatest fault was exactly the same as yours and mine. The great trouble with mankind is unreasoning pride. It makes us touchy, competitive, scheming, short-tempered, boastful, unjust. This is another reason why Simon's transformation is so valuable to us. In the beginning, he was so much like we are. Peter might have gone on all his life as a simple fisherman and a proud but blustering sinner. The thing that started the change in him, of course, was the fact that he met Jesus. This meeting was not the result of an accident. He was introduced to Jesus by his brother Andrew. It was probably the biggest thing that Andrew ever did. After all, what bigger thing can a man do than to introduce someone to Jesus? Is the biggest service any man can render on this earth. How many men have you brought to Jesus? How many have I brought to Jesus? We could all do better. even the best scholars. Behind every great man is an Andrew who helped him get started. Behind Paul was Barnabas, who traveled up to Tarsus and brought the recently converted Saul. Brought the recently converted Saul back with him in order to get him started in the work that God had planned for him. Behind the great King David was the lesser figure of Jonathan, who shielded David from the wrath of King Saul. No man is so great that he does not need his Andrew. Do you have an Andrew? Are you an Andrew? The first meeting of Jesus and Simon is an interesting one. It is fascinating to see how Jesus handles him. Let's read from John chapter 1, verses 32 to 42. Again, the next day, John, that's John the Baptist here, John stood with two of his disciples. And looking at Jesus as he walked, he said, "Behold, the Lamb of God." The two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. Then Jesus turned and seeing them following, said to them, "What do you seek?" They said to him, "Rabbi," which is to say, when translated, teacher, "where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come and see." They came and saw where he was staying and remained with him that day. That was about the 10th hour. One of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother, Simon, and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. Now when Jesus looked at him, he said, "You are Simon, the son of Jonah. You shall be called Cephas," which is translated a stone. Of course, being the Son of God, Jesus sees the blustery impulsiveness, the emotional instability, the tendency to blow hot and cold, to confess one time and deny another. He sees the crying need for change in this man. So he holds a picture up before Peter. The picture of the man he can be. "Thou shalt be called Cephas," which is by interpretation a stone. "You shall be Peter the rock." This statement would have special meaning to Simon. At that time, Isaiah was read in the synagogues more than any other prophet. And one of the most popular passages of Isaiah was the one that reads, "A man shall be as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land." Jesus is telling Peter, "You can be that man, Simon. I will make you that man." It would have appealed to Peter. It would have awakened a deep longing. Yet at the moment, it must have seemed very unlikely to him. Jesus is always taking our greatest weakness and turning it into his strength. We say, "Other things I can do, Lord, but never this." He answers, "Without me, you can do nothing." And then proceeds to do with us the very thing we thought impossible. To make us that one character we secretly long to be, but thought we never could be. I have no doubt that he can take anyone the least bit willing and do anything he wants to with them. It was so in the life of Simon Bar-Jonah. He didn't look very rock-like when the Lord called him, but the Lord was thinking more about what he could turn Simon into than what Simon was. After his first meeting with Jesus, Simon apparently went back to his fishing boat, impressed but not completely convinced. He probably had doubts about ever becoming Peter the Rock. He went out and fished all night and didn't even do a good job of that. When he came back to shore and started cleaning his nets, he had another meeting with the carpenter from Nazareth. Let's read about this meeting in Luke chapter 5, verses 1 through 11. And it came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret, and he saw two ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them and were washing their nets. He entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And then he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had left speaking, he said to Simon, "Launch out into the deep and let your nets down for a draught." And Simon answering him said, "Master, we've toiled all night and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word I will let down the net." And when they had done this, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net broke. And they beckoned unto their partners, which were in the other ship, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, so that they began to sink. Now, can you imagine that? Catching so many fish that your boat won't even hold them. When Simon Peter saw that, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he was astonished, and all that were with him, at the drop of the fishes which they had taken. And so was also James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, "Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men." And when they had brought their ships to land, they forsook all and followed him. Jesus preached from Simon's boat. And after he finished his sermon, he turned to Simon and told him to cast his net into the deep water. It sounds almost casual, but it was a crucial moment. And Simon impulsively started to answer, "We fished all night and haven't caught a thing." But suddenly he stops. He probably wonders, what on earth does this carpenter know about fishing? But something in the calm confidence and the poised expectation of Jesus stops him. It is evident that Jesus is not just talking. He's expecting obedience, but by what authority? Yet it seems to Simon that authority is present. Maybe he thinks, wait a minute, this is supposed to be the coming Messiah. Maybe I better listen to him. This strange carpenter is a man to be obeyed. We can almost hear the change in Simon's voice. He says, "Nevertheless, if you say so, I will do it." It was a great moment for Simon. And it is a moment we all must face. Jesus comes commanding, and we don't see the sense sometimes in his command. We think we know what we want. We can't see how this command will help. It is our loss when we shrug our shoulders and say, "Not today. Maybe tomorrow will be a better day for it." But it is a greater moment when we stop, listen to the quiet insistence of the divine command, and then say in a great second of decision, "Nevertheless, if you say so, I will do it." When this decision is made, things begin to happen immediately. We can refuse obedience, and life will move steadily on as it might have with Simon. Some days fishing will be good, and other days will be bad. But day succeeds day in weary futility. Life becomes a tedium that never goes anywhere at all. But when we say, as Simon did, nevertheless, if you say so, I will do it, life suddenly becomes exciting. In a few minutes, Simon was struggling with a net full of fish, the like of which he had never seen before. He calls for his friends to come and help him. And then as it becomes apparent that the catch is safe, in spite of a broken net, Simon looks up and shakes the wet hair out of his eyes and gazes at Jesus. The great haul of fish is forgotten. Nothing in the world seems important right then, but that strange man standing there waiting. Simon starts toward him but stops. The awful truth rushes over him. This is no ordinary man that he faces. What right has Simon to rush up to him? The dark picture of the wasted years of his life flashes before him. What business has he blustering Simon before a man like this? He is gripped with a new humility, a terrible realization of the difference between what he is and what this man is. He stands stricken. Calmly in that tense moment, Jesus stands waiting to see what Peter will do. Will he turn and run? Will he offer Jesus a partnership in the fishing business? That would be a real short deal for Simon. And it's so terribly like what we want to do with Jesus sometimes. Instead, Simon falls on his knees and confesses his sin. Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. I'm not worthy to stand before you. At last it has happened. When a man meets God, the moment of truth must come. When the man sees his own bankrupt soul. The first command that Jesus had given Simon called for him to do something on faith, but had demanded no sacrifice. To let down the nets looked foolish but not hard. Now Jesus asks Simon to do something that will prove costly. Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men. Follow me, and I will make you a fisher of men. This is a demand that Simon not only this is a demand that Simon's not only to do something, but also to give something up. There are a fishing boat and a business to give up. Simon is a married man with responsibilities. Jesus gives him no guarantee whatever. Later, Jesus will promise God's providential care, but for the present, Simon must decide to give up his livelihood and follow without any assurance that he and his family will not suffer destitution as a result. For all of us, there must come a time for sacrifice, a time when we have to give up something. We see that Jesus isn't going to help us accomplish the desires of our own will. He demands that we give it all up and surrender to his will. Jesus has great things in store for you, as he did for Simon. But the way will be costly. Demands will be made. If we will surrender to them, we will find obedience our greatest joy. Look at the man crawling out of a warm bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. He bolts his coffee and leaves a warm, comfortable house to brave cold morning air He drives quite a distance and then gets out and walks over rough country. He gets sunburned and smelly. He gets hungry and tired. Do you feel sorry for him? Well, don't. He's having the time of his life. He's going fishing. Nobody but a fisherman could understand why he does it or how he enjoys it. The same thing is true in far greater degree of fishers of men. Quit worrying about the hardships of fishing for men. Sure, the Lord may ask you to get up early or to sit up all night. He may make you go hungry and get tired. He may want you to drive great distances. You may have to put up with being laughed at or persecuted and harassed. And today, in today's world, that's more and more a possibility. You may find yourself working hard for very little pay. But oh, what a joy beyond joys when you're fishing for men. You don't have to be a preacher to do it either, any more than you have to be a commercial fisherman to fish. How can we become fishers of men? I think Romans 12 is a pretty good answer. And I'd like to read it this time as we close the lesson. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what is God's will, His good and pleasing and perfect will. For by the grace given to me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment, in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you. For just as each of us has one body with many members, these members do not all have the same function. So in Christ, we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. We have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is giving, then give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honor each other above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Do not live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, saith the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing so, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Paul gives an excellent summary here of what it takes to be fishers of men. It takes a life of service to others. Christ is calling you to follow him just as he did Simon. You may not understand all there is to know about the kingdom of heaven. Neither did Simon when he was called. You may have doubts about your ability to really make a success of it. But you can say as Simon did, nevertheless, if you say so, Lord, I will do it. If you can, life can begin for you the minute you do so, just as it began for Simon. That's all I have this morning. If there's any way we can help you to become a fisher of men, if you're already a fisher of men, if there's anything the church can do to help you with that, if you can help your brothers and sisters become better fishermen, we all have to work together toward that end. If you have a need this morning, if you have a need for baptism to start that walk, the baptistry is ready, and we can help you with that. You just need prayers to be stronger and be a better fisherman. We can pray for you for that. To come forward and have a seat in the front. We stand and thank you.